Okay, we're live now.
Okay, we are live now. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. It's very hot here in Lisbon, so I'm trying to survive with the heat, the heat wave that we have now in Europe. So
How hot is it?
yeah, around 30 plus degrees every day. Yeah, I
What is
don't
that
know
in
how. Yeah, I don't know how that converts into like Fahrenheit degrees. So
Yeah, okay, 102. That's
yeah,
hot.
yeah. hmm And most apartments don't have AC here, so yeah, it's complicated.
That's fucked up. So how are you trying to stay cool?
Well, I do have AC, but it's like an improvised one, like we
Yeah.
try to just put something in there and try to stay hydrated, basically. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, not easy.
I was doing cold showers. Sometimes I'll do like a cold shower in the middle of the day.
Yeah,
Just like that sometimes helps. I don't know if you're
yeah,
looking for like tips right now, but
not sure. I mean, for me, it's like, drinking lots of water and taking
Mhm.
naps in the afternoon when it's just too hot to survive outside. So yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, cool. So it's hot over there and you're trying to survive.
Exactly.
Focus on heat survival.
Hmm.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Got it. Great. Well, it
Um,
is a very nice, windy, kind of breezy 80 degrees here, Fahrenheit. So I
okay.
think that would be like maybe 22 or 20,
Ah,
maybe.
perfect. Hmm.
Yeah, it's quite nice. Blue skies.
Nice.
I put up some new bird feeders yesterday. So we've got a lot of birds in the backyard.
Oh, I saw you
Um,
shared a picture of a bird from
yeah.
your
That's a
backyard.
West Mountain bluebird. Very pretty.
Nice.
Very pretty. Yeah. So
So
we're pretty
nice.
spoiled right now.
Aren't your dogs trying to like chase the birds in the garden?
Always. Yeah,
Yeah.
always. Always. So
Because
I put
my
up some
my
bird
dog,
houses.
yeah,
Yeah.
she goes crazy. My dog when she sees like birds.
Really?
Mm, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She tries to
Cool.
eat pigeons and stuff. So yeah. Anyway, shall we dive into our topic? Because I guess we're not here to
Yeah.
talk about birds and weather.
We totally could. I also think like Nikki Kaywood is in the chat, and Nikki is our
Oh,
lone viewer right now. So I feel like if we can go talk about what we were going to talk about, burnout, everything, but if Nikki wants us to talk about something, I feel like
sure.
Nikki,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, Nikki, chime
Of
in if you
course.
want us to change topics, or if you have questions for us, Nikki. So you're part of the crew right now. Um,
No pressure.
yeah, yeah. So you want to talk about burnout together?
Well, I
Who do
thought
you want to talk about
about
first?
also no, I was thinking also about like the podcast episode we recorded together,
Yep.
and I wanted to also like kind of continue the conversation from there because obviously you asked me a lot of questions last time, and I didn't get a
Yeah.
chance to ask you questions, so I wanted to
Oh
like kind
shoot.
of
Okay.
continue like the conversation, but this time me asking you also a few questions. Don't worry,
Awesome.
nothing tricky, but
Hit
to
me.
start, I was wondering like what got you interested into leadership in the first place? Like how did you because I understood you're a scientist by training.
Yep.
So how did that happen? Like working as a scientist but then building a company around emotional intelligence and leadership. How did that come together?
Yeah. Great question. So I'll try and keep this story shorter than I would normally do it. So you just interrupt me if I'm going too long.
Okay.
So I studied chemistry, and I don't know if it's the same way over there, but maybe around like year two or year three of undergrad, and definitely into grad school, you have the opportunity to go join a lab. And the lab will have some sort of a research mission that's funded by our professor. And the professor really has two jobs. One is to secure funding for their research and do
Hmm.
research for the university. And the other job is to teach, obviously. And so some professors will focus more on teaching, some will focus more on research, depending on what they like to do. And this is the foundations of academia, but as an undergrad, I had the opportunity to join a lab that built, they were a quantum dot lab, and they were focusing on synthesizing quantum dots and then putting them into a polymer matrix and then in
Okay.
between sandwich glass. So imagine like a glass sandwich. And those two pieces of glass sandwiched polymer plus quantum dots. And what they would do, quantum dots are really interesting. They're these tiny particles that are, I think, like are 1/10,000th or one, millionth the size of a piece of hair,
Okay.
and they can absorb and emit light.
Okay.
And when they absorb light, they can absorb all sorts of light. So pretty much the entire solar spectrum, as we know it, and observe it, the quantum dots can absorb and then they emit light. And you can use this technology to basically have a transparent piece of glass that can
Mhm.
funnel light to the edges of the glass, and you can put solar cells on the edge, and you can use it to generate electricity. So obviously, it's not as effective as just having a solar cell, because a solar cell is going to be way better at absorbing sunlight and turning it into electricity. But
Mhm.
you can't put solar cells over your window if you still want light to come through. And so,
Ah,
these could
okay.
be technology where you could replace your window, and be able to generate electricity
Mhm.
while still being able to look outside. So they're called luminescent solar concentrators, LSCs, and pretty niche technology. It's been around for a little while now. It was big during the quantum dot research boom about like 10 years ago or something. And
Okay.
so one of the things that's interesting about these is that if you have like a team of undergrads who are all doing research and a small team of grad students, you can't have one person who really knows about all of it,
Mhm.
right? Like the best stack really for this sort of like undergraduate research would be to have you've got a polymer scientist, you've got a quantum dot chemist, maybe you've got someone who's
Mhm.
in material science who can look at the interface between the quantum dots and the polymers. And then maybe you have like a physicist or some sort of like an optical and analytical chemist,
Okay.
or some sort of like optical physicist, someone who can do, different analyses. And so
So
what
like a
this
very diverse team, kind of,
totally,
right?
totally
Okay.
interdisciplinary, extremely diverse. And yeah, that was a lot of technical setup. Anyways, I found myself on this research team, and
Mhm.
it was really interesting because all of a sudden we were doing like a 2 to 3 year group project, right, as
Wow.
undergrad and early graduate students. And we were trying to look at how we could increase the efficiency of these transparent solar windows. And so my job was to build the devices and synthesize the quantum dots. And so I was a device builder, and I learned how to make quantum dots. And there was a lot of other things that were required for that. Ooh, thank you, hon. Kara's bringing me some snacks and some beverages. And so that's where like it was really like a high stakes group project. And I think
Mhm.
what's really difficult in science, especially, and what I learned was that leading in that environment is extremely tough
Mhm.
because you have a bunch of different grad professors who all have their different funding sources and have their own different goals, and all of them think that their science is definitely the one that should be innovated on to advance the
Mhm.
technology.
Like the
But you need
priority. Mm.
absolutely, but you need all of them to come together in order to advance the overall project, right, where
Yeah.
the science is really occurring. And so that was like 3 years of my life. And I definitely cared about it a lot more than I did school or other things. And so I just spent a lot of time leading in an interdisciplinary fashion. And that carried with me over to a few of my first few jobs. And so, what I developed early on, because I love people, I love working with people. One of my favorite jobs ever was as a camp counselor, working with kids. And
Okay.
so I think that's where I learned a lot of my emotional intelligence skills and how to work with people, was as a camp counselor, as a summer camp counselor.
Nice.
Um, and so when you put the two together, that's where I really learned how to be able to bring emotional intelligence to a technical field. And so ever since then, it's been extremely helpful in my career. I haven't had a job in a technical field where emotional intelligence didn't serve me and where it wasn't extremely helpful and important. Um, so
Was that your
those
cat? Sorry, I got
is my
distracted.
cat.
It's a
I don't
cat
know.
that just
Way more
appeared.
interesting this time. This is Fox. She's going to be
Oh,
joining us today.
adorable.
Yeah.
That's super interesting because, well, most of my family is like scientists,
Yeah.
so I kind of like grew up with a lot of talk around, um, science and like how to do your job from a very analytical and pragmatic way. And emotional intelligence or leadership was never a topic. But then when you enter the workforce, you're like, okay, I need to work with people. I need to have a boss or I need to manage myself people. And if you don't have like any, background in that, it can be very difficult.
So it wasn't talked about when you were growing up, but it was definitely a part of your family, you would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, my parents wanted me to also pursue like a scientific career, which obviously did not go as planned because I was terrible with numbers. So like maths to me early on was like very difficult. Even nowadays I still use a calculator for like basic operations and calculations because it's not
Yeah.
my brain just doesn't process numbers really well.
Hmm.
But languages and words, yeah, like that, no problem. So
Yeah.
it was always of a not a challenge, but like, being surrounded by so many like technical people and also having this pressure of going into a technical field.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, no, this is not gonna work. Like I really tried, but yeah, doesn't didn't work. And coming back to leadership, like growing up in France, these are not things we were taught in school. So like
Hmm.
you learn maths or you learn, languages or whatever, and then you're supposed to enter the job market with only like your technical expertise.
Hmm.
And all the problems I had at my workplaces were usually like management related or
Yeah.
leadership related. And then I thought, well, why is it something that we're not taught early on? Because
Yeah.
we could prevent a lot of situations if that was the case, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Yeah. I took some leadership classes in college, and those were my favorite classes ever. I really regret selling that leadership textbook that I had because I
Really?
think,
Can't you
well,
buy it back?
I totally could. I totally could, but I don't want to. I don't know. It's just
Mm.
expensive. But I kept my physical chemistry textbook, because I was like, oh, this is the hardest science I learned, and it's going to be so
Mm.
helpful for me, and I'm going to need to be able to do, diffie-q on, chemical waveforms and stuff. And it's just like, no, like I don't pick it up. It's really fancy looking paperweight, and I wish I had my leadership textbook. Um, and
Mhm.
so I think that I would definitely encourage people to go outside of, because everybody's forced to take communication 101, if you're
Mhm.
going, or something similar and basic, technical writing
Yeah.
classes depending on your major. But I think, I would encourage people, like you're saying, to go seek those courses out, because it's the most important thing I think anyone could have right now.
Yeah. I don't know how it was in your experience, but I noticed that a lot of companies I worked at, you would encounter managers who were promoted not necessarily because of like their managerial skills, but because they were so long in the company that at some point, they had to be promoted somehow. And so you end up with people in like leadership positions who have been doing their job for like a lot of time, but they're
Yeah.
not really, I'm going to stay diplomatic here, but like, they're not really like people oriented, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's you know, a reality of the market, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and it's something that still nowadays I have a hard time understanding. You know.
100%. Me too. And I think that happens all over the place. You're right. Someone gets good at their job and they're like, oh man, we don't have a higher step on this technical
Right.
contributor track. Let's make them a manager. Let's put them in charge of other people who are doing the same thing. And that's fundamentally flawed because of a lot of different reasons, because the skill sets are completely different. And Kim Scott talks about this in Radical Candor, and she's got a really salient view on it. She talks about the difference between rocks and rock stars, and she says that there's two kinds of people: the people who get bored of their job, and obviously we're oversimplifying, and there are way more kinds than just two people, and maybe this will change depending on the season. But two kinds. She says two kinds: rocks and rock stars. And the rocks are people who are really awesome solo contributors and have great technical knowledge. And you should create a bunch of career pathway for them to keep doing their thing and to get better and to upskill and to become better at being reliable every single day. And then you have rock stars, people who are interested in becoming management, people who are interested in learning new things, people who want a new job every 2 years or something. And those people should be paid the same. And you shouldn't be cross promoting a rock star into a rock position, nor should you have a rock go into the rock star position unless they want to, because and are really interested in that. You want different pathways, and we should make it easy for folks to stay in their lane because that's what they're good at. That's what they're going to be happy doing. And then you get into a situation where someone's promoted into a position where they have zero of the skills that they actually need, right? And that's the Peter principle that we promote. We promote people to their level of incompetence. And we'll promote people to the job level where they stop being able to produce results. And we see it everywhere. It was meant to be satire. I think the original book was supposed to be satire, and it's just so true that it
became more accurate than it was intended.
Yeah. Annie G has a question. Do you think people skills can be developed from scratch? Do you want to take that? I've got an answer.
Well, you can go first, and then I'll add my insights if I have something to add.
Hell yeah, they can, Annie G. Hell yeah, they can be developed from scratch. I think that it's tough, and I think we're all born with a baseline level of empathy and emotional intelligence, and we get worse at it over time. And so I think kids actually have some of the best people skills that we can have. They're naturally curious. They don't have cultural bias. Racism is a taught skill, is a taught thing. Kids are naturally curious. Classism is taught, and just based off of our environments and our culture. And so in some ways, as adults, we lose a lot of our ability to have empathy and emotional intelligence because these are parts of us that make us feel safe and allow us to come to the workplace and be better. So I think absolutely it can be taught. I think there's really easy skills that anyone can learn, irregardless of how much self-work they want to do. For example, we could talk right now about how to be a better listener, or some really solid strategies that you could use to take better notes in the workplace. I think even getting a square 8 hours of sleep makes you less of, well, it makes me not an insufferable bitch.
Same here.
Yeah. So if I sleep, I'm easier to be around and I'll like listening to people more.
Yes.
So those are easy things you can do without going to therapy. I think being able to dig deep and find out, those small parts of you that we repress, and that self-work into learning some of the deeper parts, I think are more tough, and that's a longer journey, but I definitely think it's doable. And you should stay in touch, because that's what I do. That's my job. That's my company's purpose.
Annie is my friend, so I can link you if there's some knowledge interest there.
Absolutely.
But I do agree with you. I think that it's something you can learn. And Honestly, I do believe that the workplace in general would be a better place if people just listened more. And
Hmm.
we just say, "Ah, yeah, listen more," but people actually don't listen sometimes. Like they say they listen, but they don't actually listen to what someone is trying to tell them. At least that's how I felt in my past experiences. And just by being like more curious towards each other and just listening, like only those two things already can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So I think some people are naturally more skilled, also depending on like the history, like the personal history, the background, and all of that. But it's definitely something that you know you don't have to become like an expert, but you can reach like an okay level just to be more agreeable to be around, or like to improve the workplace in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think the small things are what we focus on first, right? And then everything after that is um, part of the journey. And I think it just depends on how much time and resources you have towards it, and what where you want to be, right? Where you want to go and what you want to be good at.
Yeah, definitely. This makes me think like it's a good transition because it makes me think about, I think
Yeah.
in one of your articles you talked about receiving like feedback from one
Uh
of
huh.
your team members that was quite
Hmm.
difficult for you. And I
Hmm.
was wondering, when you have to give difficult feedback to a person,
Yeah.
how do you approach that, like, to maintain the relationship with the person, like not to hurt the feelings or whatever, but still
Yep.
you have to give difficult feedback as a
Yep.
manager. How do you approach that? That's something I'm really curious about.
Good question. Great question. So I think that I like to think about it. So I coach a lot of athletics. I've been an athletics coach for over 6 years. So I coach CrossFit. I do personal coaching. I've coached endurance athletes with their running. I've coached a little bit of rowing here and there. And so a lot of my frameworks for feedback have to do with coaching. And so
Okay.
I'd like to oversimplify the workplace and think about it like it's an athletic movement. Because if we think about it that way, for whatever reason, we're a lot more receptive to taking feedback towards a physical movement than we
Mm,
are towards workplace. Because the purpose of the coaching and its outcome are a lot more clear, right? Like if I have an athlete who is doing a movement improperly, let's say that they're shooting their hips up when they do a squat, and that is
mm,
putting a lot of load on their low back. And for older athletes, this can be really dangerous because our low back is a sensitive area of the body. So if I were to coach him and say, "Hey, you need to get your hips down, keep your hips down and your chest up when you're squatting," the the output is twofold. One, they're going to
mm,
be able to lift more weight, and two, they're going to be safer. Right. So my coaching is coming from a point of I want their body, I want them to be able to come into the gym tomorrow, and I also
mm.
want them to be able to lift more. Right. And so that's where my feedback is coming from. And I think that when we look at it that way, I don't get anything out of it by them being better, but they get something out of it by being better because they've signed a waiver. So if they get hurt, it's not on me either way, right? But that's not like
Yeah.
it, benefits are all for them to gain. And so I think we should take that to the workplace, and we should design our feedback as if we're a coach. And
Hmm.
so when I'm giving really difficult feedback, I think about, okay, what's the impact and how is this going to make them better? And so I've had people who, a lot of the feedback that I give lately is a lot of technical writing feedback. My
Okay.
team's incredibly great at what they do. I'm actually upskilling my team so that way I can get them to be better technical writers, because that's not something that you get a lot
Mm.
in the manufacturing world. And so I've been working with them on a lot of technical writing. And so they'll produce these writing samples for me, and they're pretty bad, right? Like if I was a college professor, I'd give it a D plus. So I'll tell them that, and I'll
Okay,
say,
that bad.
it's good. I mean, it's good. It's 66% of the way there is how I think about it. Right? It's more close
Okay.
than not. And
Mm.
so I think it's just an honest conversation. And I bring them in and I say, look, here's all the things you did really well. I want you to keep doing these things. Here's the gap we're missing. right? The impact of this gap is that when you don't have cited sources and you're not thinking about your audience when you're writing, and you're not thinking about this instructional feedback guide or whatever from the lens of someone reading it and wondering whether or not they can actually use this, then you're
Yeah.
failing, right? No one's going to be able to read this and think that it's helpful. And so I think I try and be as blunt as possible. I try and give the feedback as directly as possible. I try and stay in as objective as possible. And I really lead with the point of here's how we make it better. And
Mm.
then I don't give up. I don't give up on them. I don't let them give up on themselves either. And I stay with them and I make sure there's I think it's book a meeting from a meeting. Bam fam. It's a sales rule. So you never like a
Okay.
goal a sales rule is that you never let a sales call go without booking your next meeting. This is like a
Okay.
rule in sales,
Like a
right? So
follow
you
up kind of. Mm-hmm.
should always have a follow up call. You're always, when you're talking to a prospect, you always want to make sure that you have the next call booked before you get off the call. And that helps you have some sort of call cadence. So that way you never have to go back to the email stage or the
Mm-hmm.
texting stage to be able to get a call with your client. So I do the same thing with my employees, especially when I'm giving difficult feedback. I say, okay, I'm going to give you difficult feedback. Are you ready? Yes or no? Okay. Do you want a
Okay.
snack? Like, do you want a cup of tea? Like, this is going to take us
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes. So I prime them, I give the feedback, I make sure that I'm supporting them, and then
Mm-hmm.
I schedule a series of meetings after that for like the next 2 to 3 days to be like, okay, we're going to sit down for 15 minutes tomorrow. Bring me questions. Let's
Okay.
work on it together. And so that's how I go about it. I think about it like a
Mm-hmm.
coach.
Okay.
And
So
then
like you supervise improvement afterwards. You don't let them alone.
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
the stats on feedback are that like 50 to 60% of feedback, especially interventive feedback, where you're trying to like change a behavior or give some sort of big piece, is that it leads to negative engagement and negative productivity after you give the feedback.
Okay.
And so I think the gap is really that people are like, oh, Jimmy's fucking up, and if I we're gonna tomorrow 8 o'clock, Jimmy's gonna come to our office, and we're just gonna fucking Jimmy's gonna get an earful of it, and we're gonna tell Jimmy all the ways that he's a shithead and pissing us off.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
if we do
Mm-hmm.
that, sure, Jimmy will be well aware of where he's falling short, by
Yeah.
our estimation. But if we don't
Mm-hmm.
set some sort of a follow up and think about it more of like, okay, Jimmy has a tendency to do X, the impact is Y, and so we need him to understand his impacts. That way he can rein it in,
Yeah.
and then let's have follow ups. Jimmy, get in our office, like 10 minutes. Just come on in, tell us how it's doing, tell us what you need.
Yeah, I love this because I was Jimmy in some of my previous jobs, and maybe for like the people who are watching this, so I'm French and I worked in Paris, and what everything you've been telling us makes me think of this book called The World Map or The Culture Map. I don't remember exactly the title, but it was basically saying that in the US, the way you give feedback is like you start with what went well and then what can be improved. And in France, we start by what's not working. So I had this boss in Paris that was very direct, and she would lead by saying, okay, this is shit, you need to do this again. So very like me, as a sensitive flower that I am, I would become
Yeah,
Jimmy afterwards, because I was like, oh my god, I'm not good at what I'm doing, I'm not gonna improve. So I would enter this overthinking loop of I'm never gonna improve like whatever I was supposed to do. And it's a shame because if she had approached the feedback, with more of a coaching framework or coaching mindset, I'm pretty sure that I would have done great because I had the skills to do, the reports that I was supposed to do. But then it affected me personally so much that I would go home, cry into my pillow, and then the next day go to the office and like pretend that, yeah, I know what I'm doing, but I didn't because she wasn't helping me.
100%.
So I think the way you give feedback is actually super important. And if it's used well, it can really increase the performance of someone, of an individual, in like a, very dramatic way, I would say.
Yeah. Can I say something else on this subject?
Sure, of course.
Yeah. So I think that if someone isn't doing well, the first place leaders should look at this is themselves.
Mm.
And I think that when you know how in dog training, when people say, well, if you have like a poorly behaved dog, like that's on you, you know, or like if your dog has
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, like that's on you. Um, and which,
My dog is
sucks.
a bit anxious, so should I
Yeah,
start?
my heart too. I'm like, oh, I know where they get
Oops.
that.
Mm.
I think that as leaders, we like to think that our systems are always perfect, and our onboarding systems are perfect and our explanations are always crystal clear. And,
Yeah.
everything that we're doing is the bee's knees. And so if our employee isn't, performing, or if they're not doing what we think they should be, our immediate thought is, what the fuck? How can you not read my mind, and like do this
Yeah.
better? Right. And so I think that one thing that I've definitely learned over the years, and something that I think is incredibly true, is, whenever you're dealing with an employee who you are going to give some feedback, or you are going
Mm.
to have, some sort of a performance discussion, especially behavioral. Like, did you tell them what the rules were?
Yeah.
Like, did you, as the leader, make it clear, here's the performance bar, here's what good looks like? And why this has to do with coaching is, one of my favorite coaching philosophies isn't about giving direct cues.
Mm.
So, here's what this means. If you are coaching someone to do, a squat, we'll stay on the squat this entire time, and they don't know what good looks like, then they don't have a strong mental model in their mind of what they're supposed to be doing. So
Mhm.
what they do is they become reliant on you as the coach to tell them whether or not it's good or bad. And then let's say you're cueing them and you're saying, okay, hips down, chest up, engage your core. They
Mm.
don't actually know if their chest is high enough until you say, oh, that was a good rep. Or they don't know if their hips were low enough until you either stop telling them, hey, get your hips down. And the problem with
Mm.
that is that if you're coaching a group of people, or you want them to focus on a specific thing, they're relying on your feedback to know whether or not you did well or not. The best way you can coach someone is by making sure that they have a strong mental model of the movement, and then
Mm.
by helping them understand and think critically about whether or not they've met the mental model. So the best way to coach someone in a movement would be to show them what perfect looks like, and you
Mm.
explain what perfect looks like, and then you have them go try it, and then you ask them, you say, hey, how did that feel? You don't say, oh shit, Debbie, your hips were fucked on that. Like, you really gotta get more depth. Your knee flexibility or ankle mobility is screwed.
Mhm.
It's asking them, okay, how did that feel? Like, do you have a strong mental model? How do you feel like you were performing in relation to the mental model? And what that does is it allows people to internalize what they're doing versus the bar you set.
Okay.
Here's why let's bring it back to the business world. If you have someone who's like bringing you work product, and you keep saying like, oh, this is good or this is bad, right? Like the French lead,
Yeah.
your French boss was like, this is shit, this is shit, this is shit. Did
Mm-hmm.
she give you an example of what good looked like? And did you understand the assignment when you started? Because then you can coach yourself, and that's the best way to do it, because then you just need the coach for like technical correction occasionally, or to help steer you in the right
Yeah.
path. But if our employees don't have a strong mental model of what they're doing, then they'll never be able to take self-agency and think critically over whether or not they're actually doing it well or not. So coaching philosophy has come further than management feedback philosophy in this way. And I could spend an hour here. But
I
I
mean,
think
it's fascinating. It
the
is
best way
super
to be
interesting.
be a leader and give feedback is to be a good coach. Anyways, yeah, sorry. I interrupted.
No, no, don't be sorry. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you've touched on a super interesting and important point, which is that people should also be um, like trained not only in emotional intelligence but also like coaching. How do you coach your people to grow as individuals? I mean, that's like the
Yeah.
definition of a leader to me. So it's not like the boss who's giving you instructions vertically and, okay, you need to do that, which
Yeah.
unfortunately is still what happens in a lot of companies, right? It should
Mm-hmm.
be, okay, how do I help you grow? How do you become more skilled, competent in whatever you're doing? But this makes me think that we were supposed to talk about burnout today.
We don't have
But
to.
actually, I was wondering,
Yeah.
because it made me think. I had another question for you today. I'm interviewing you. Sorry, it's like, if you have questions, of course, feel free ask me questions, I would
I
be
love
happy
this. This is great.
to
I like
answer. Cool. Because, obviously you write a lot about leadership, emotional intelligence, and we talked about burnout as well previously. And I
it.
remember one question from Matthias. I don't know if you remember, he was asking, what can companies do to prevent burnout? And my question would be, is like burnout the responsibility of a manager as well, or is it more of an organizational issue? Like, where does the responsibility rely? Can a manager do or like implement strategies to prevent employees from burning out, or is it the company that has a structural problem which leads employees to burn out? Like, where do you see the line on that?
Yeah. Okay, this is good. So I think
It's a
first of
hard
all,
question.
oh no, this is good. This is really good. I'm thinking about my answer. So, the first thing that I think of when it comes to burnout is where does the blame and responsibility lie? And I think that a lot of leaders probably are pretty not aware that they're causing burnout in their employees.
Hmm.
Like um, most don't know that that's what they're doing, and a lot of people aren't in touch with it. And I don't think our systems are good enough. So, I was just talking with someone about the Gallup study. There's the Gallup 2026 data that says that 70% of the employee workforce is disengaged.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And depending on where you look, I just burped. Did anyone hear that? Chat, sound off. Um,
Hmm.
20% of people are actually engaged in the workplace. And I don't know exactly what that looks like because I'm not sure if it's like people are showing up to work and they're not doing anything, like they just do nothing, because I think more people would know. I think that's a surprising statistic to us.
Hmm.
But maybe people aren't caring or they're not bringing themselves to work. And so I don't know if that study's awesome because I'm not sure exactly how we define engagement versus not. And like, where do we draw the line? Like what's engaged versus not engaged?
Hmm.
And how would we be even able to tell besides like self-reporting? So, and does it just mean that they're doing their job but they don't care? Anyways, I think that in burnout and disengagement in itself comes from a number of different things.
Hmm.
And if we use the CDC level of burnout, then it's really about the system that you're living in and the environment that you're in and your ability to be able to take personal agency and control your life within the environment. So if we think about burnout from a work perspective, you maybe are working more hours, you're trying to like go to work and produce some sort of a result, and it's not working, and you're kind of banging your head against it, and you go home and you're not sleeping well, your recovery is kind of screwed up, maybe your hobbies have
Hmm.
taken kind of a back burner because you're just trying to get through this busy stretch. And if that goes on and on and on, then your ability to recover is going to be diminished, right? So, from a
Hmm.
mathematical perspective, if we just looked at the individual, if you can't recover from your work stimulus, then you're going to burn out, right? You're going to degrade over time.
Yeah.
And so that's how I like to think about burnout. Whether or not we put all of the onus on management and the systems to fix it, I think depends on the environment because people can burn themselves out too. I've burned myself out before. And so I
Hmm.
think it depends on the individual. But if you were a manager and you wanted to know if your team was burnt out, I think just
Yeah.
are they showing up late sometimes? Do they look tired? Are they asking for tasks? Did they seem excited? You
Dark
should be able to
circles under the eyes as well.
totally like you should be able to suss it out. And if you don't have a good idea, then I can give you some clues and
Hmm.
some questions to ask, but it's really not that hard to tell, I think. And so, what can a manager do to try and solve that? If we first talk about like a middle manager, like directly interfacing with the team, and then maybe go to a senior
Yeah.
manager level on what they could do, the middle manager can control scope
Okay.
and they can delegate work. And I think that whenever you're delegating, the two things you need to have in mind are who is good at doing what and who likes to do what. And ideally, you're being able to delegate tasks to people based off what gives them energy, right, and makes them feel good and happy, but also they're really good at it. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to delegate to people who hate a task, but they're awesome at it, in which case you need to have them train someone else to go do it. But from the delegatory perspective, if you're not doing that, then you should be, and that would be one thing you can do. And I think the other thing is control scope and make sure that you're not asking more of your team than they're able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, really making sure that you're watching the hours that you have in the day and the amount of work that you have, and you're the first person to say no when someone asks you if you can take on more work. And on a small level, I've seen this as someone. I had a friend, and she just had a whiteboard, and she was like, "Okay, here's the 12 tasks that we're doing." She
Mm-hmm.
took the little whiteboard. It was like a 2 foot by 2 foot whiteboard. She took it around to all the different managers in the office. She said, "Hey, prioritize this. Do you want to argue with this priority?" And then she'd say, "Okay, well, Steve said number two is
Mm-hmm.
higher priority than three or one. Like
Mm-hmm.
Steve, go talk to Alex and you guys talk, and then I'll change my priority if you guys can agree." So she
Yeah.
totally just took the responsibility off of her team to have to manage other people's priorities. And then once the whiteboard
Wow.
was agreed upon and the managers were like, "Yep, this is it," she hung it on the wall and they worked on that priority list. And she said, "We're not working overtime. We're not doing extra. We're taking our lunch breaks. We're showing up on time. We're going to leave on time. This is the priority. If you want us to do something else, change this list." And she'd
Okay.
have the manager's name next to the senior leader's name next to the task on who owned that task. So that way she didn't have to do it. She'd just say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, this is Alex's task. Go talk to Alex."
There's
Uh,
ownership for all the tasks. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you have like a small, tight knit team and you're working like a 20 to 30 person company, that works really well. If you've got a larger team, I think depending on the amount of systems that you have, just know that it's your job to say, like, "Hey,
Mm.
time out. We have enough on our plate. This is the things we're doing. And we're not doing that unless, we get more resources." And
Mm.
then I think the conversation shifts to being, are you appropriately staffed? Are you cross trained appropriately? And can you get more people soon enough that you can take on more scope to be able to help your people out? So I think it's
Mm.
really just being able to say no, and how creatively you can do that will impact how
Right.
successful you are.
Mm.
From a senior level, um, I think it's really about looking at your systems and whether or not you're making fair asks, and being able to move resources around smartly. And I've got a
Mm.
lot of thoughts on this in different articles, but I'm already giving a long winded response, so I'll cap it there. But
No,
if
it's
anyone,
super interesting. Yeah, no, I was reading Dido's comment because he was saying that he also experienced burnout, and the way he dealt with it was by detaching from work. So like he was still doing it, but just going through the motions, like no passion left. And I can also talk for myself. Like when I went through burnout, there was a moment when I was just like a robot. I was just showing up, doing my things, saying yes to everything because I didn't know how to say no, and I would feel guilty if I said no to something. And just leaving the office feeling completely empty, depleted, until one day it didn't work anymore. And if you look at the statistics, I can only talk about like France, which is where I'm from, but I know that every year the people who experience burnout is just rising, and the blame is put on the individuals. So I still see on LinkedIn, for instance, managers who take screenshots about, okay, I need to take like a sick leave because I can just not do my job anymore. I'm exhausted. And the managers are, kind of like almost making fun of those people that they just want to go on vacation, so they pretend to be sick because they don't want to do their job. And it just doesn't make sense because you look at the numbers, the amount of people who experience burnout is just going through the roofs. But I don't feel like the companies or like, the management or the leadership is asking themselves this question. Okay, are we doing something wrong? Are our systems maybe not working? Is
yeah,
communication working? So this is why I was asking you this question, because if there are strategies that can be implemented to prevent burnout, then why not do it?
absolutely. I think a lot of it comes to do with scope control. So just speaking broadly, a lot of it from my end and what I've seen and what the literature shows from my own
Mm-hmm.
literature deep dives is scope control. boundaries, work boundaries, strong roles and responsibilities, and then having really good scoping procedures for how work is assigned and when we take on more stuff.
Yeah.
So, what I mean by all of this is that if you're a manager who isn't aware of how much scope your team has and what they're currently doing, then you need to become aware, right? And you need to understand how much your team has and like when to be able to say no or how to be able to triage that. And it's always a
Mm.
scope versus resources thing. So if,
Yeah.
this is project management 101, if you're taking on more scope from a customer or from anyone, even an internal customer, and there's no additional resources, the answer is no,
Mm.
flat out. If there's no more people or there's no money, no, or time, people, money, time. Anyways, so I think,
Yeah,
from
but it's hard to say
yeah,
no. I think,
yeah, it is. It's so hard to say no.
it's
Oh, it's
super
incredibly
hard.
hard to say no. It's incredibly
Yeah.
hard to say no. And saying no while also sounding it like you're saying yes is a skill. So boundaries.
Yeah.
If there's an expectation on your team that they're supposed to be able to respond after hours, first of all, what the fuck? Second of all, you got to find a way to fix that. There's too many
Mm.
AI chatbot tools out there that can help triage this.
Yeah.
And so, being able to help people disengage, being able to draw a clean line between this is work and this is not work. That's another thing senior leaders can help do from a policy perspective. And they're going to say, look, don't
Mm.
respond after hours. If you want to work after hours, that's fine, but come late the next day. Track those hours. Like
Mhm.
actually sleep in and come late. So that way, take your kid to school or make French toast or something. Like enjoy your morning.
Mhm. Yeah.
Track your hours. So that's something I'm diligent about. Is that if my team plans to stay late to help finish a deliverable, I make sure that they come late
Yeah.
the next day. So that way they
Compensate the. Mhm.
yeah, because it's just not safe, especially if people are driving late at night. And we work a compressed schedule, so
Mhm.
we show up at our first stand up meetings at 6:30 a.m. And my team's not leaving till 5 or 6 sometimes, so it's just not safe.
Mhm.
Um, so scope, boundaries, and then scope assignment. I
Yeah.
think people need to be in charge. People need to have agency over what work they're doing. And if they're not involved in the process of saying, okay, we've got this package of work that we need to do, and we're going to delegate it to these people, and this is how we're going to get it done. If the team's not involved in those conversations, you're kind of fucked because like they're not,
Yeah.
you shouldn't, they need to be involved in this conversation. And that's just, period. So, and that's also kind of project management 101. So I think if managers thought more like project managers, they'd be able to control burnout a little bit better.
Mm.
But I've had team leads before who were getting calls on their days off, like they'd go take a day off to take care of a family member or something. And they're getting paged 20 times throughout the day for phone calls. And, I had to have a conversation with them and I was like, look, dude, like this is also on you. You need to leave your pager in the car and leave your work phone in the car and not answer.
Yeah.
And if someone messages you, I want you to take note of it and I want you to bring it to me because I need to have a conversation with them because I could have answered that and I was there that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time you respond, you make it okay for them to message you, right? And then we're training that in the individuals that that's an acceptable way to get information. And so that also leads to burnout because then the team lead is thinking about work while they're supposed to be caring for a family member. Like that's
Yeah.
inexcusable. So those are some things that leaders, can do with their systems and their policies to make it better.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you've touched also on what individuals can do, which is, as you mentioned, like learn how to set boundaries. If
yeah.
I have a manager who's messaging me after work, I'm done. Sorry. I will see whatever you're asking me about tomorrow
Hmm.
morning at the office, and I'm not
Hmm.
paid for extra hours. So, but
Yeah.
this is something that was very difficult for me to learn, how to set boundaries, how to say no, how
Yeah.
to not spiral into like an overthinking guilt trip or whatever, that
Yeah.
I'm a bad employee or whatever, because it's very difficult. You still have like a power relationship, as an
100%.
employee. You are expected to do your work. So obviously, if my manager comes to me and asks me to do whatever needs to be done, I will tend to say yes. Unless I have this like boundary and say no muscle trained, then I can accurately assess my capacity, which is difficult. Like it's not something, when you enter the job market, it's not something you naturally know how to do. Unless you experience it, then you realize, okay, yeah, maybe I should have said no because I was already exhausted and I didn't have capacity to do whatever, report she wanted me to do. So I think
Yeah.
it's a very misunderstood topic as well, like how burnout happens, how what it actually means, the amount of work you need to do to recover from it. Like,
Yeah.
again, I can say from my own experience, I had to completely reevaluate my relationship to work and, priorities and all of that. So, yeah, it's something that companies should have in mind.
So Alamide and Diana have some nice things in the chat. Alamide has a couple things. So she said, I struggled to recognize burnout because I worked in environments where working nonstop or taking on all the project was rewarded as hard work.
Yeah.
And she's totally right that how the company culture plays a role is definitely here. And she's got another example of a manager who told her not to respond to emails during certain times. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, absolutely the employee can set a boundary, right? But how better is it when the employee doesn't have to set the boundary and the manager's setting the boundary and the manager's saying, no, we don't do emails after work hours. Don't do that shit.
Yeah.
um, that completely absolves the need for the employee to even set a boundary in the first place. And how powerful is that?
Yeah.
And again, on the projects, like, would you rather have 10 things done kind of shittily by someone who's burnt thin, spread thin and tired and just taking on scope because it looks good? Like, how quality is their work? Like, what are
Yeah.
we actually rewarding for? And who's benefiting from that? And if you have a team of other individuals who now aren't getting great work experience because you have one like scope hog, who's just trying to do everything, like that doesn't serve the
Yeah.
team. That's great for their empowerment as individuals. So, I think if you are the manager who is looks at someone who's doing a lot and you think it's impressive, I think you should challenge those assumptions, and really look at the quality of their work. And to Dayano's point about most people ridiculing burnout as tiredness, like, hell yeah, like people are only going to empathize with the situation once they've experienced it, and
Yeah.
once they know. And so, like, I would expect Annabelle to get it because Annabelle's been, you've done an entire life redesign, because
Mm.
of burnout and have structured your current and future professional career based off of your experience with burnout.
Yeah.
Um, versus
Completely.
the people who were the I've had okay, so I've had well, anyways, yeah.
No, did you have a thought or like?
Well, I just one time we were asked to work extra hours. We were doing 50-hour weeks. And I
Well,
was like, guys, this is a really bad idea. We shouldn't do this. There's better ways that we could do this. And there were, and no one listened, and we did it anyways. And so my team was all of a sudden working 50-hour work weeks.
oh my
And I
god.
was there with them because they needed me there. And I told the older manager came into my office and was like, hey, why are you so against this? And I was like, why do you think that it's a good idea? And he was like, well, back in my day, we had to do these like crazy concrete pours, and sometimes it wouldn't happen on schedule, and we'd just stay late and get it done because that's what we did. And I stood up and I looked at him and I was like, Rick, just because we were fucking stupid back in the day doesn't justify being stupid now. And like, just because it worked then doesn't mean it'll work now. And unless you have a schedule where you can show me this is real and like that we're actually going to be able to make up ground from this, then I don't want to fucking do it. And he went and told like two of my skips, that I was being insubordinate, and that I was. But here we are, 3 months later, and everyone's burnt out, and we've got a bunch of people who want to quit. And so, like, okay, like, how did that go, right? And so, I
It
don't.
makes me sorry. It makes me think of that quote, or I don't know. It's like something I saw online that says,
Yeah,
back in my day, we didn't have therapy and we didn't complain about our traumas." And the answer is like, yeah, it shows. Like
yeah,
we can see that something is not working, obviously. So just because we didn't do it before doesn't mean we shouldn't change the way we do it today. So
totally. And just because you stayed up late a couple days, getting overtime in the oil fields doesn't mean that we need to burn out our professionals, or that that's like something
completely.
we owe the workplace.
Yeah,
Yeah, good talk. That's
completely.
yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, I was also being aware of the time because we're
yeah.
almost reaching like 1 hour of live. And I had one last question for you, if that's
Hit
okay.
me. Yeah.
I was wondering because you mentioned that, you're a manager yourself, you're writing about leadership, emotional
Hmm.
intelligence. And what is something you're still trying to figure out about leadership as a manager yourself?
Mm,
Something you're either, trying to wrap your head around, something you're experiencing.
yeah. So the more I learn, the more questions I have,
Mm,
And so a lot of days I think I start to feel like, do I even know anything about any of this? Right.
yeah.
Like I think one thing in particular that really scratches me is whether or not you can train the person who doesn't want to learn and how you get that person to want to realize that what they're doing is shitty. And I
Mm,
think the easiest answer is you can't. Like they just kind of have to touch the stove and burn their hand and learn that it's hot for themselves, or maybe they'll never learn.
yeah.
But there's so many leaders out there, who just don't get that they're damaging the people around them, and all they have is excuses or reasons why what they're doing is fine, and it's just the circumstances around them. And so, one thing that I really want to figure out is how can you make that person like have some sort of self awareness that there's
Yeah.
better leadership to be had, especially from them.
Mm,
And a lot of them didn't get there because they're dumb. A lot of them are really smart, right? Like they didn't just fall into leadership positions. Like even the
yeah.
people we were talking about earlier, where it's the Peter principle, and they're a really great technical worker, and we promoted them because we didn't necessarily have a better technical option, but now we have this extremely gifted worker in a leadership position. How did like they're not
Yeah.
deficient, right? Like we didn't just find some random person and put them there. They're gifted and they're smart and they worked hard to get where they are. Um, so what was it? Annie G was asking, can we teach self awareness? And can we teach emotional intelligence
Yeah.
skills? My argument would be that we can. It has to be from someone who wants to learn. And then how do you get that person who doesn't want to learn to teach? And I really wish that I had a perfect answer for that. And the answer is I don't know. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, because while I was listening to you, I was reflecting. I've had managers who I would say were probably, quite toxic. I mean, in the sense, with like narcissistic
Yeah.
traits and no capacity of like introspection.
Yeah.
So, how do you? I mean, this is for like a completely other conversation, maybe next time. But I always
Yeah.
wonder how can you give feedback to someone who is like not willing to be self-aware and who rejects all responsibility upon it's the circumstances, it's someone else's fault. Like nothing is ever their own fault. Like they don't take accountability and I honestly think that the workplace is still full of people like that, not to be very dramatic or pessimistic, but they do exist. And I think the challenge is how do you work with those people? You know, if you have to work with them and they're not willing, because I think I told you once I was working for a person who was very difficult to work with. And I tried to give feedback about how to improve the process because I felt like I didn't understand some of the tasks that were given to me. So I was trying to like be open and explain, okay, I need more feedback, I need more information because right now I don't have enough to do my job properly.
Yeah.
And every time my feedback would be completely dismissed in the sense that, oh, but we don't do this here, we've done this like this forever, so we don't need to change.
Mhm.
Basically implicitly telling me that, okay, figure it out by yourself, like this is not a problem, or if it's your problem then deal with it yourself. So again, coming back to this idea of how do you work with people who are not willing to listen to you, who are not willing to take accountability for their responsibility.
Yeah.
And what can you do? I mean, the only thing I did was like to protect myself, but I don't know what else I could have done. You know?
I think what's worked for me is put your own team first. So I try not to engage in any, what I think of as bullshit. So,
Mm,
if I have the option between going to a meeting that doesn't have an agenda with someone that I don't want to work with versus
yeah,
spending an hour being there for my team, I'm going to make the decision to be there for the team every single time.
yeah,
And if that person who's exhibiting, some sort of manipulative work traits or is just, kind of a tough person to deal with, has problems with it, then I have no problem saying, well, your meeting needs to have an agenda if you want me to go.
yeah,
And you need to make it clear why you need me specifically there because you didn't call me or page me and the meeting still happened. So you didn't need me there to do it. And I have no problem doing that because I've made it. I think I've got good bosses and they know where I stand on this.
lucky
So
you.
I know, but I think the other thing
Mm,
is, and I don't want to say like fight fire with fire, but if there are those difficult people, you have to make sure that if they're on your team, you're either working with them and they know what their impact is, or you're trying to get them off your team.
yeah,
So I think try the coaching approach, and if they don't want to be coached and if they don't want to grow, then they're in the wrong spot, and you have to make a very clear decision about what sort of culture you want.
yeah,
If they're not on your team and you don't have control over where they sit and what work they do, and you can't help them make a good decision on where they're going to sit and be impactful and helpful, then it's your job to put a container on their behavior, and also spotlight it and make it clear.
yeah.
So I've had people try and socially pressure me in meetings, and I'll just sit there and be like, "Hey, it sounds like you're trying to socially pressure me socially into making this decision in front of everybody. Is there a reason why you're doing that?"
Yeah.
And that usually shuts most people down because they don't expect it. No one talks like that in the workplace, but if you can summon the courage and the ability to do that, and you're not scared of what the repercussions are, then I say fucking go for it and just torch them, because that's
Mm.
just unacceptable. And I have no problem doing that.
So like
Um,
exposing the behavior and like naming
yeah,
it and
a couple weeks ago, and I think I've got a podcast coming out about this on Monday. I was going through a situation where a leader was lying to me about trying to talk to my people, and they
okay.
were being dishonest about their motive on whether or not they wanted to lie to me. And the day it happened, I was really shook up because I was like, "Did this motherfucker really just lie to me, to my face, and then go tell, try
Wow.
and poach an employee from me?" And so I
Mm.
went to him, and he kept lying, and he said something like, he was like, "Well, you didn't hear me say that right." And I was like, "Well, I did. And I told you that you needed to call me in
Hmm.
if you talk to them about this." And they were like, "Well, I didn't hear you say that." And so I'm like, "Well, I didn't hear you say something that you didn't say, and you didn't hear me say something that you said. So I have two options. You either neither never do this again, or if you're going to maintain this behavior, then we'll go talk to your boss right now, and I'm going to call HR. What do you want to do?" And he's like, "Well,
Whoa.
it's in the past, like, so let's just leave it there." And I was like, "Is it in the past? Like, it's kind of happening right now. Like, are you sure you want to do this?" And so, like, I think that there are people out there who the moral of the story isn't to like be a prick and throw your weight around, but I think that calling out the behavior for what it is can go a long way, and it can at least show people where your boundaries are at. And if you
Mm.
don't like how people are treating you, then putting a spotlight on their behavior and the impact that it has is coaching.
Mm.
And putting those boundaries in place isn't a bad thing, especially when it helps you. And it's not, depending on how big your workplace is, it might make your work
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But at least people won't lie to you, and at least people will respect your boundaries. So that's helpful. So take
Well,
your pick.
thank you for sharing that. I think we should write a piece about it, like how to deal with your toxic boss and just give like tips and trips, sorry, tricks, yeah, whatever, on how to, deal with that. And I think that's something very useful. Like I wrote something along those lines because I also had to deal with a very difficult manager.
Yeah,
And yeah, sometimes, you need to do whatever you need to do to stand tall and stand in your shoes.
cool. This has been great, Annabelle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for everyone who joined us.
Yeah.
And well, we have our Substacks that, if you want to read more about us, you know where to find us. And if you have more questions, we'll be happy to answer them, even in chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What time is it
Thank
over there? Are
you.
you about to go to bed?
Wait. How do I end this? Ah, here. End live
Perfect.
video.